What that allowed the vision of Mr. Miyamoto to do was to say, now that I have the ability to manipulate polygons in real time at a fast enough frame rate, then instead of just going back and forth, now I can run around in circles or move into or out of the screen. So it brought a whole new dimension to the gameplay. And the controller was actually designed with an analog joystick to be able to control that movement. And that's how the N64 was actually created, and why the controller was designed the way it was. Also that it had 3 prongs so that you could shift around to whichever way you were going to use it. But I remember when I first saw that game, I thought, this is revolutionary. This is going to change gaming for everyone forever, because now you're in a world as opposed to just a flat 2-dimensional screen or being able to shoot things in the distance. Now you were able to go through doors and jump through windows and all kinds of really cool stuff. So,
begged my mom for a console. I begged her, and it wasn't until the N64 came out that she finally gave in and let me rent an N64. And she was still sort of anti-video games, but then she saw that my dad and I bonded through video games, and we played Mario 64, and I would come home and we'd sit down in front of the TV and just play games for an hour, and so she finally gave in and bought me an N64 for Christmas.
Really the first game I ever played was with these guys, my cousins, and it was on the Nintendo 64. I've always been a big RPG person, and it really started with Gauntlet Legends on the 64.
Maybe as a traditional console, favorite would probably have to be the Nintendo 64, just because I spent so much time on it.
And 64! When I was growing up, that was like my console. It completely changed the way graphics looked when you played video games. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, spent hours on it. GoldenEye, Mario Kart, I was addicted to N64. I think I lost an entire summer to that console, so it'll always be in my heart.
I would say Nintendo 64 of all time, just because there's so many awesome games and you can pick it up at any time and know exactly what you're doing because you've done it so many times. Right now I play PlayStation 3 mostly, but definitely Nintendo 64.
And then moving on to the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64, you started to see 3D for the first time. 3D models, polygons and stuff, and that was fascinating because it started to add a whole new dimension into what gamers were used to. And so, for a long time it had been this 2D, sort of parallaxing 2D planes in a lot of different ways. And the closest you got to 3D was Contra, when the two guys were running down the hallway together, which is obviously a fake. But I'm specifically about consoles, not so much about PC. But as you sort of moved into that 3D era, you started to see people start to play with, what are the kinds of mechanics we can do now? What are the things that we can actually play with? What's this new world of this other dimension? And so, it was painful at first. Certainly there were good examples of it, but it was hard. It's hard to give the players this whole nother level of freedom that they weren't used to, and people had to get used to it, both from a development and from a player standpoint.
It's like the Cabbage Patch Kid. People kill each other in a toy store in order to get that Nintendo 64 game. I'm one of those people. Yeah.